Adam Shartoff introduces us to one documentary, Pussy Riot, A Punk Prayer, and its co-director. Here are several clips from that documentary.
У нас на квартире собирались девочки, члены вот этой группы Pussy Riot. Причем их достаточно много было, и я их не особенно различал, потому что они все время какие-то разные приходили. Девочки из разных городов, даже у нас там жили какое-то время, когда негде было остановиться.
На куплетах просто колбасимся вот эти все движения.
Единственное, что там сбивка по-муски, ну ладно, не важно.
Мне кажется, надо орать все, вот эти боксы, вот эти вещи.
Не ногами, мы же хотели ногами еще. Да. Это, знаете, как?
Они что-то там сочиняли, потом я обратил внимание, они вот это начали изготавливать вот эти балаклавы с прорезями шутливые. Я говорю, девочки, вы что, решили банк грабить, что ли?
Не чувствую, ничего не вижу. То, что я вижу сегодня здесь, меня просто потрясает до глубины души. Я никогда не видела такого количества камер. Что означает группа Pussy Riot? Феминистская панк-группа, она очень важна для становления России, я считаю. Потому что если не будет появляться таких групп, не конкретно это группа, это просто одна из тех, которые должны появляться. Я уверена, что особенно после такой неожиданной огласки появится огромное количество тех людей, которые хотят делать вещи похожие на эти. И меня это будет очень радовать. Я надеюсь, что я как-то смогу узнавать об этом, даже находясь в тюрьме.
Суд переходит к судебному следствию. Пожалуйста, государственный обвинитель, изложите предъявленные подсудимому обвинения.
В судебном заседании установлено, что Лаконникову, Самуцевич, Алехина и неустановленные соучастники 21 февраля 2012 года пришли в помещение Кафедрального собора Русской Православной Церкви храма Христа Спасителя, проникли в огороженную часть храма, предназначенную для совершения священных религиозных обрядов, и в крайне непристойном для подобного места одежде, вызывающего света и длины платья, непозволительно с учетом нахождения в храме, открывающей различные части тела, руки, плечи, в масках с прорезями для глаз и рта, вызывающие яркий рассвет.
Лаконникова, Самуцевича и Алехина обвиняются в совершении преступления, предусмотренного статьей 213 частью 2 Уголовного кодекса Российской Федерации, то есть совершении хулиганства, грубого нарушения общественного порядка, выражающего явное неуважение к обществу, совершенного по мотивам религиозной ненависти и вражды.
Today we're joined by half the filmmaking team behind the documentary Pussy Riot, A Punk Prayer, Maxim Pozdorovkin. The film, whose co-director is Mike Lerner, follows the court cases of the Russian feminist, anti-Putinist punk rock protest group Pussy Riot. I'm sorry, that was a tongue twister, forgive me. And the subsequent imprisonment of its members. The film has remained in the news since the remaining members were released in the past few weeks. It premiered at Sundance last year, is being distributed by HBO Documentary Film, and has been shortlisted for an Oscar. And speaking of Sundance, Maxim's latest project will also be shown at Sundance this month. So considering all this, I really appreciate your stopping by the studio.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Good to see you. Well, first we saw this great clip, but give a little bit also a synopsis, I guess, of the film.
Well, the film is very much about the trial that Pussy Riot, the 3 members of Pussy Riot were put on after their performance in Russia's biggest cathedral, Christ the Savior. And so it's very much a present tense account of the 6 months between their arrest, it starts a little bit before their arrest, and then their subsequent sentencing and imprisonment until a week or so ago.
Yeah.
And you know, from the very beginning, it was such a big news story that I felt it was really important to kind of make a film that was in the present tense, that could come out quickly and help support, and also dispel some of the misconceptions that people both in the West and in Russia had about the story.
Yeah, and I mean, and certainly the members, the 3 young women, Masha, Nadia, and Katya, who form Pussy Riot, they kind of participated in that with you, right? As, in a sense, they kind of partnered up with you to kind of work, to dispel some of those things, didn't they?
Well, during the filmmaking, you mean?
Yeah, and even since, in a sense, like you've kind of, you know, it's almost as though the film and their actual, and Pussy Riot have kind of almost created a thing that's larger than.
No, again, I think that from the beginning what they were doing is that they were trying to create, you know, an alternative visual iconography for a protest movement in Russia. And also they do fit into, I think, this global zeitgeist of essentially radical left movements around the world, whether it's Tahrir Square, Occupy, what have you. I think that they're part of that in a way, but I think that they had such an original and both eye-grabbing and tongue-grabbing and every other way of doing it that they really became kind of international celebrities as a result of their protest. But it should be said that, you know, one of the reasons for this is also the way that the government has reacted to them at every stage. You know, what they wanted from the beginning, the reason for creating this kind of alternative opposition is to confuse the government, to confuse power, to make people not really know how to react to them. And that's essentially what they did. And at every step, rather than letting them go or punishing them with a fine and essentially killing the story, by lashing out against them, the Russian government has really enhanced their moral authority. So whereas a lot of people were against them at the beginning, and many still are against what they did initially, the fact that they went to prison, the fact that they behaved so courageously during their trial is very important, and I think has left them in the position where they're in now.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the government is really out of step, out of touch and out of step, during this entire experience. And then like these women really have kind of figured out how to work the system to their advantage in terms of communicating their protests, in terms of using technology, et cetera.
Yeah, they're incredibly media savvy, and I think that that's very right. And I think that the Russian government is a bit difficult to analyze because what its agendas are internally within Russia, which is a conservative country, and then its appearance abroad are. These two things are constantly in contrast, in sharp contrast, and Pussy Riot have done a lot to reveal the hypocrisy of those two positions. And so I think that for that, being media savvy and understanding, especially how Western media works, has been very helpful. You know, they're incredibly postmodern savvy, aware of how images work in modern media culture, and ultimately, you know, they're performance artists, they're media artists, and you know that's what they do.
Yeah, yeah. Was there any? Do they have any support in the government at all? Or did anybody?
Not within the government. I mean, they have a good deal of support in Moscow, and amongst the sort of a new liberal class and the children and the new middle class that has developed in Russia over the last 10, 15 years. Most of their support is from there and sort of radical artist circles and. But I think that right now, again, their support was much less when they were initially in prison. A lot of people, maybe like 70–75% in Russia, thought that they should be punished. The fact that that Masha and Nadia went through the ordeal of, you know, being essentially in various gulags and coming out and still having their moral integrity and now they're working on a nonprofit organization and an NGO for prisoner rights and prison reform in Russia. So I think because they've done that and they've essentially stuck to their guns, both politically and artistically, and maintained their integrity, that I think a lot of people are kind of coming around to them and seeing them in a slightly different way.
Right, and the film is banned in Russia?
Well, I recently came back from Moscow. I went for, amidst finishing a new film, I went for 5 days after they were released, and we were planning to show the film at the Gogol Center, which is a theater, and it's a theater that's partially publicly funded. And upon arriving with the Blu-ray hidden in my luggage, we found out that the film was officially banned by the Moscow Minister of Culture, Sergei Kopkov, which was, again, a mistake because it became a big international story, whereas realistically, we would have just had a press conference and a conversation about the film. Yeah. There's nothing in the film that people don't know, but who are who live in Russia and who followed the story. And so I think it was, again, one of these cases where it's just very hard to figure out what exactly the government was thinking and trying to do this, or from where exactly the command came. Because a lot of times what happens is that, the government will react kind of arbitrarily and inexplicably to something, and then what happens is that there are waves of paranoia and fear that resonate through the system, and then that causes for self-censorship at all different levels. Because people in management positions are always risk-averse, and they're going to be always risk-averse. I think that's what happens in a lot of these cases. It's not necessarily that the government is telling you you have to shut all of this down, but they'll act in one way, and then all these other people will become scared, and that's usually how censorship actually works. It's very rarely, especially these days, where it's just a strict command. You can't do this.
Yeah, and there are nowadays, of course, ways around that. I mean, you may not be able to have a public screening, but you can certainly see the film if you want to.
No, I mean, and that's what's really funny is that especially Russians are very good at pirating and torrenting material, and so everyone that wants to end the film is, everyone in Russia that wanted to see the film, I think, can see it. So
it's maybe the first time where a filmmaker is pro-torrent. In this case.
Yeah, especially especially in Russia. I'm all for it.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. I'm also kind of a little hesitant to mention the being shortlisted, but if in the great chance that the film Pussy Riot does indeed get nominated, and you do go to Hollywood and to the ceremony, will you be able to bring your film subjects with you? Will Pussy Riot be able to go?
Yeah, in that case, knocking on, is this wood? Sort of. I think it came from wood.
It'll do.
At one point. Yeah, we're hoping that in case the film gets a nomination, the 3 members would probably come with us and attend the ceremony, and that would be wonderful.
Yeah, that would be. I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
They may use a delay on the for I don't know. I don't think they have a delay at the Oscars. I think it is live. I might be wrong, but.
Yeah, I think a lot of announcers will be gleeful about having to say Pussy Riot on the Oscars, and so.
Yeah.
A lot of people get a tingle on the inside when they have to say it.
I know I do. Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's part of the lexicon. So, and we know that last year, Pussy Riot: A Punk Prayer, it premiered. It had its U.S. premiere anyway at Sundance. It was a world premiere. It was a world premiere at Sundance. And you're going to be back at the very next Sundance, coming up next week with another film.
Yeah, the new film is called The Notorious Mr. Boot, and it's about a Russian arms dealer named Victor Boot, who was. He was the inspiration for the Nicolas Cage film Lord of War, and it's a film that me and my collaborator Tony Gerber have been working on for about 3 years, and it's also like Pussy Riot. It's kind of a found footage film in large part, and it's made up of over 200 hours of our subjects' home movies filmed around the world in war zones in Africa and Afghanistan throughout. So I'm very excited about this film and excited to be back.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, I wish you again all the luck in the world, and I hope it does take you and the ladies of Pussy Riot all the way to the red carpet come this spring, February. When is it?
I think it's March 2nd.
Keeps moving around a little.
Originally, actually, the night of the Oscars was the original date that the women were supposed to be released from prison. They were released earlier under an amnesty program, but originally it was supposed to be the same night.
Okay, well, anyway.
March 2nd.
I appreciate your coming over.
Thank you.